everybody, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thank you for joining me for another episode. I guess this is new actually, so I should say that I'm introducing this. This is one of my newer concept ideas for content for the channel. I am introducing my fireside chats. So this is going to be me chatting with people from the Astro community. Possibly it will venture out into tarot, metaphysics, other teachers and stuff like that. But really, I just wanted to create this cool space for creating content that is very real and is important to me, and be able to bring fresh faces, onto the channel, where you guys can get a little glimpse into some of the magical people who are in my life, who are a part of my Astro family. Some of them are friends, some of them are going to be teachers or people who have read for me, and people who I really admire. So I'm excited to introduce to you my good friend, Rose Theodora. She is one of my BFFs and a total wizard astrologically. Thank you for joining us, Rose.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So fun.
What time is it there?
I don't even know. I'm like lost in time. It is 8:02 p.m.
Okay. It's not too late. So today, Rose and I are going to chat with you guys, or I guess we're going to chat. You're going to get a little bit of insight into how our brains work. Rose is one of my favorite people to talk to about astrology because she has a lot of aspects in her chart that are very, very, very intuitive, very insightful, and very magical. And I love chatting with her. We're constantly kind of rapping about things and asking each other about perspectives. And she's like a little astro dictionary when I find myself I'm in a little bit of a brain fog. Rose, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? Where do you live? What do you practice?
I live in Spain. I moved here. How long ago now? 5 years ago. When my progressed Mars entered Scorpio, conjoined Jupiter in my ninth. I am just a lifelong astrology lover, and I love that you said wizard. I'm obsessed. What else am I? I started studying evolutionary astrology, probably like you, Western astrology. And then over the last 2 years have really studied more ancient astrology, especially, incorporating a lot more techniques because I needed more depth. I was like, okay, here's the psychological basis, but I need so much more. In college, I studied neuroscience and art history and really wanted to go into the art world, and then just found that it fell so short of soul. And astrology has always been the backdrop of my life for everything. So I kind of had to claim that I was an astrologer years ago, and just, live it every day, breathe it every day. I can't do anything else, as you know, all of our conversations. And so, and I'm practicing from Spain. And is that all you asked?
Yeah, I'm just interested. Do you feel comfortable sharing with everybody your sun, moon, and rising?
Absolutely. Fifth house sun conjoined the North Node, square an eighth house stellium in Libra, which is trine my ascendant in Aquarius. My moon is in Libra in the 8th. And Jupiter conjoined Pluto in Scorpio at 0 degrees.
So you also have your passport stamped to the underworld like me.
We're qualified on Pluto matters. Yeah.
We've been to hell and back. I'm just curious, what are you currently studying or geeking out over, whether that's a particular type of astrology, or is there something else that you're really focused on right now?
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Pluto always. But I taught a course on the deeper meaning of Pluto and how we, when we are under its influence or come into a strong aspect by transit with Pluto, how it takes us on this journey. And so I'm really obsessed with major Pluto transits. Of course, the United States is having its Pluto return, or just did yesterday on the 22nd. And also, the United States North Node is conjoined my sun, I think, if that's correct, right? 13 degrees Cancer. Yeah. So I just think it's an interesting time as Pluto's getting ready to cross my ascendant a few years from now, but if you use whole sign in Aquarius. So I'm really kind of geeking out on Pluto and what Pluto means and just the deeper meaning. I'm so sick of hearing like Pluto means transformation, Pluto means death. It's such a deep planet, and it sticks around for so long, and it makes such influential aspects of the other outer planets. And so I've just been really obsessed with, Pluto, but I've been obsessed with Pluto and its transits and its mythology and its deeper meaning.
I love that. I'm a big fan of Pluto myself. I feel like being very Plutonian. I have like Pluto conjunct my sun and Mercury. Obviously, you've seen my chart. Trines like Jupiter.
Love your chart. I love your chart. I mean, just to say, I was thinking about it today too, how it makes that sextile to your stellium in Capricorn and how that is so needed, right? It's like we cannot help people or guide people unless we are constantly doing that work and somewhat grounded ourselves. And I just think for you having that Scorpio stellium is amazing to also have a Capricorn stellium.
Telling people I'm like, the astrology that we've been experiencing from like November through now is my life. The sextiles between Scorpio to Capricorn, the stellium in Capricorn to Pisces. It's been people are like, I'm melting. I'm like, welcome to my life. This is what I'm constantly doing. So now it makes sense because I'm experiencing the trines, right now, Jupiter and Neptune are forming trines with my Pluto and my sun and my Mercury, and also my natal Chiron, Jupiter in the 10th. So I am very, very, very emotionally overwhelmed. And I have found that just coming into some of the transits right now, I've got Uranus getting ready to oppose all my Scorpio stellium too. So there's some really profound shifts that were going on. Before we got on the call, I was asking Rose, I'm like, did you watch Changing of the Gods? Because I feel like that's like a buzzed kind of topic right now in the astro community. And of course, the whole first episode was about the archetypes of Uranus and Pluto, and looking at throughout history when there were conjunctions and squares and oppositions, and seeing it visually. Just being astrologers, if we know how that plays out, having spoken to people or experienced the transits on our own, but watching it play out visually and just seeing the differences throughout history revolving around the opposition versus the square has been super fascinating for me to see the differences. And transit Saturn right now is squaring my Pluto, and Uranus is opposing it. So I'm getting both the opposition and the square, and I'm finding that it's not so much actually about Pluto for me right now. It's more about Uranus. So I'm learning a lot more about Uranus, which inspired me to want to reach out to you because you have Aquarius rising, and I know you're also digging deep and kind of preparing for the Pluto transit. Actually, Pluto's going to cross, I guess, your whole sign ascendant. My chart's a freak chart because I have 0 degrees on all 4 angles, but Pluto's trining my ascendant right now. So I think that's kind of like the one saving grace that I'm starting to kind of realize, that it's about partnership and working with other people, really kind of leaning on that Libra rising. Who have you studied with? Like, I'm curious about that because I know you have a nice little rap sheet.
Yeah. Well, my mother was my first teacher, which I actually forgot. I went home to see her during a Mercury retrograde in Pisces right before COVID. And I was going through some old papers and found all of these old charts and books. And she's like, yeah, we used to talk about it. And I started remembering these conversations and like going through the book. So my mother was really my first astrology teacher. I've studied with Rebecca Gordon. I've studied with Robert Hand, Mark Jones, specifically regarding the nodes and Pluto. Who else? I'd say they're my main teachers.
So can you tell us, where can people find you, and maybe what are some things that you're offering in terms of your services?
Sure. I'm a counseling astrologer, but right now I think I'm booked out pretty far in advance. And I am teaching a foundational course in astrology that you can take on your own. And then I have some intimate courses that I host on Zoom to really practice reading charts and then learning how to synthesize and read for one another, called Reset. So people can find me on my website, rosetheodora.com, and of course on Instagram. I'm not on YouTube.
Not yet. Now you are.
now I am. Here I am.
This is Rose's big debut.
And I have a podcast that has been on pause for over a year, but it was 25 episodes. Remember?
It was so good. I listened to all of them. It was so like, your voice is very soothing and like very therapeutic. And I would love how it would, like, it had all this like really nice Libra-esque stuff. I was like, this bitch. All the music and the aesthetic and the soft voice. I was like, I wish I could be like that. I'm just loud and nasal.
Your rising is Libra. I love it.
We're both very Plutonian, but we're also both pretty Venusian, I think, with all that Libra. And I have a 7th house moon, Libra rising, 2nd house stellium. I'm like an honorary Taurus when you think about it, because all the planets that I have in the 2nd house. So I'm just curious before we get into rapping about specifically what the books might say Pluto and Aquarius is going to bring, because obviously when we're dealing with Pluto, that's some heavy shit. There is definitely some very kind of dark themes that will come up, especially when we see it ingress in any sign. But, I feel like Pluto is definitely, when we look at the chart, it's going to make itself very announced. What are your hopes for, I think, the Pluto and Aquarius transit? Do you have anything that immediately comes to mind that you're like, well, I'm hopeful it brings this?
Yeah. I'm really hopeful that people use intelligence and integrity when dealing with a lot of the open data stuff, a lot of the regulations that will change around how we share information and what is possible. And just in terms of ethics, like, I really, really hope that becomes a well talked about topic. I think ethics are so important as we move into Pluto's ingress into Aquarius, and then going way far out into 2025 and 2026. We have Uranus entering Gemini and Neptune in Aries. I really hope that people are more discerning about fact from experience and subjective and objective experiences. Really, I hope that people really get in touch with what is right for them and integrity. That's my biggest concern and biggest hope.
Do you think it's going to bring vampires back? Like, do you think vampires are going to show up and suddenly be like, we're real? That's something I've been thinking about a lot. I know that sounds crazy, but I've been thinking about that a lot. I think about, and I'm going to talk about some stuff that I wouldn't usually talk about on my channel. But, for about 2 or 3 years, I was pretty heavily involved in like the ayahuasca community, and sitting and doing plant medicine and working with ayahuasca, and also working with San Pedro and like a couple other things, because for me, it's always been this experience of like really having to go in deep, energetically, psychologically, whatever. It's like, that's just the theme of my life, being a Sun Pluto. One of the very first real vivid experiences that I had in ayahuasca was some kind of spirit energy talking to me about vampires, which is kind of funny because, my background, my family's Romanian. And I've always had this like fascination and like this real love for anything in regards to that. More like, not like the brutal side of vampires, but think like Interview with a Vampire, right? Like the very romantic kind of, I don't know. Yeah. I'm more Brad Pitt than I am Tom Cruise, but I think just romanticizing that. And also I'm just a sucker for anything that's like a timepiece, and the concept and the idea of being able to be eternal is very fascinating to me, because I know on a soul level we are, right? Even if the body doesn't experience that. But during one of my
during one of my trips, it was really interesting because I had a lot of back and forth with, I think like ancestral spirits that was basically explaining to me, look, it's been very much kind of romanticized and it's been kind of manipulated. And the storyline has obviously become, at least in Hollywood and also through like fiction, just this thing that's not real, kind of like anything else, a Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, whatever. But what came up for me was that vampires are very much real, and it's not what you would think in terms of like the blood sucking and the fangs. It's more energetic vampires and people who have those abilities. And to me, it was like, oh, it made sense. It was very Pluto. It was like, it's what you do with it. You can use it to, you know, feed off of people, manipulate people and possess people, drive them crazy and be obsessive, or it can be something that is used to be able to like read minds and read people's energies and like look into their soul, and also be able to help them understand that we live in a world of balance and that there is light and there is dark, and that we have that. There are people who have that. They almost might be like hybrids. And some may call them intuitives or psychics or, you know, witches, shamans, whatever, because in so many traditions, we have people that can go in and out of those realms. And we also have a lot of people. I mean, I think specifically like Tom Brady, who just looks like he never ages. I'm convinced he's a vampire. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But I've been thinking a lot about Pluto and Aquarius and whether or not that's going to be this thing that we start to actually kind of realize that there are like hybrid humans or superhumans, and whether or not they're going to start coming out, or I've talked about this on my podcast, like whether we're going to have like vigilantes, that we're going to start seeing that there's going to be crime fighters who might be like seen as like the underdogs, but really they end up kind of saving the world in some capacity. What else do I think about Pluto and Aquarius? I guess I like you, I hope that it's going to bring back a sense of really focusing on integrity and clear communication. So we're clearly moving into a pretty significant time period. I mean, it's going to be the better part of about 20 years. That's 20, 21 years of focusing on the element of air. And that's interesting because, you know, unlike other elements, air you can't see. You know, you can hold earth, you can feel water and fire, but I don't know, you have a lot of air in your chart. Can you kind of expand maybe a little bit on just from what you've had with some of like the air transits or the air trines, because you have that in your chart? What does that feel like? How do you receive information?
Very telepathically. It's a constant, it's like your brain is an engine and it's a constant, it's in stimulus mode all the time. I mean, I literally have to like put away anything that will stimulate or trigger my mind into some kind of abstract sequence, right? So air is really about, I was just thinking about this today, like I'm always on, I'm always analyzing. And is it judging or is it analyzing, right? It's analyzing. It's different than judgment. Judgment is typically associated with Capricorn, right? As an authority. But air is constantly taking a piece of information and connecting it to a concept or connecting it to the future, the past. It's like always weaving information together. So, and it depends on which sign too, in terms of the air element, like Aquarius being part of the fourth quadrant or the collective air sign. It is about big abstract ideas, whereas Gemini is more kind of localized. It's more cyclical in terms of information. Yeah. And I have all the air signs within my chart. Excuse me. So it's just a lot of mental energy constantly. And it's, I think it can be overwhelming, especially for someone like me who has all air. You really have to get into more of like the feeling space and the grounded space. But it's also a lot of power. It's like, what do you do with that? Knowledge or that constant being on? That's what it feels like. It's a constant analyzing. It's a constant reflection or state of being reflective to some degree.
I've noticed just being an air sign, air rising, it's hard to sit down. Like you never.
It's a lot of relating too, isn't it?
There's a lot
don't you want to always? Right. I think it's like water element or earth, it's like you're more contained. When you are pervasive as an air element, it's like, you know, you're always looking there. It's a social element. So even though I don't need to be social all the time, I am always thinking, what is that person's story, or what are they doing? There's a curiosity about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, analyzing too. A lot of that in general, but especially I feel like with Aquarius, because it's one of the more evolved of the air signs when you look at it just in terms of like sequence, especially because it's fixed, you know, so it's going to function a little bit differently than Gemini or Libra. It's going to be, I think, more kind of carrying that energy through, right? It's like Aquarius being the dead of winter. So it's really going to hold the frost. It's going to hold and like crystallize things as well, because it's a very Saturn energy when you think about it. I mean, I feel like the more that I try to go into modern astrology, the more I keep finding myself, at least this last year, falling back on looking at, you know, traditional rulerships and looking at whole sign. And I'm realizing that you have to look at everything to get a bigger picture. So when we do talk about Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, we have to take into consideration not just the Saturn side of it, but also, you know, the Uranian. We have to look at both. And I guess I keep looking and comparing just in recent years with the transits that were all in Capricorn to now the transits that have been really heavy in Aquarius. And when this episode is coming out, it's right when planets are really getting ready to ingress into Aquarius. That's why I wanted to do this. I feel like, yeah, like you said, Capricorn can be about guilt or judgment or power or control. I mean, it's very militant, you know. But Aquarius is just kind of like, okay, I've received the orders from Capricorn. Let me go and do my thing. Or, you know, the decision has been made. Now I'm on my merry way. So I'm excited to see, I think in the midst of what's been years now of Pluto-Uranus squares or Pluto-Uranus aspects, now we're going to see Pluto in a Uranian sign. And that's going to be kind of interesting. So go ahead.
I'm really excited about technology, though, and what is possible if we're ethically creating and exploring. I'm really, really excited about that, like kind of quantum leap that we can make. I'm very excited about that, but it has to be handled in the right way. And I don't know if I trust.
I have concerns about robots taking over the world. I have to be honest with you.
It's a legitimate concern. Yeah.
But by the same token, if I guess what scares me is because Pluto, I feel like, is a representation of the soul. I really feel like that's a very soul-based planet. Mm-hmm. You know, with Pluto going into Aquarius, what happens if we move beyond just having robots working jobs and doing things for us? What happens when it ends up manifesting more so in the direction of them actually developing a consciousness and them being able to make decisions beyond just what they're programmed to do, or that they actually start becoming rebellious in a way?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I guess, like I said, we have to break down kind of like the archetypes of Pluto in general. So I'm going to wrap on that a little bit, just like your hot take on Pluto in general, and then we'll kind of look at it under the microscope of within the sign of Aquarius.
Yeah. Pluto in Greek literally means wealth. And it is, you mentioned this earlier, how do we handle power? We can go to the dark side or the light and really use that power for good. Pluto's very magnetic. It is the most magnetic planet in addition to Uranus in the chart or in our universe. And so Pluto represents magnetism, depth, a lot of power, wealth, and with that, a lot of change, like inevitable change. And so I think one of the more typical stereotypes, right, are death and rebirth, which is inevitable with Pluto, but really it's an expansion of soul consciousness or awareness in which you grow and that old part of you dies. So that's the extent, I think. And then I have so much more to say about it, but I want to hear your take.
I mean, I feel like Pluto does deal with, it's almost like a sword, you know, like kind of figuring how you want to wield it. Do you want to use it to be able to direct energy and be protective and be able to, I think, really use like authority, or do you want to use it to sever and cut and harm? I mean, Pluto is the one guarantee with Pluto is that when you're done with the Pluto transit, or when Pluto makes its ingress into another sign, your life is going to be changed forever. It's going to be a very distinctive shift. When I think of the Pluto transit going into Aquarius, I feel like this is going to be a really profound shift around technology. And I think that just, now looking at Pluto at 26, 27 degrees, and we're seeing all of these planets kind of inching up, I can't help but look at what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. And that, Pluto can be connected to war, as can Mars. But I think that the future of the way that we look at technology, death, regeneration, money, wealth, it's all due for an upgrade. But I'm wondering if like the new way that we are going to be experiencing war is going to be like, technological warfare, and just what certain countries can hack into and what they can mess with in terms of resources. I've had concerns, and like some people might call me a conspiracy theorist, but if we think of Aquarius being the masses and masses of people, Pluto and Aquarius, I'm a little fearful of there being like mass deaths. I mean, I guess I shouldn't fear death, but mass deaths. And I'm having concerns that may have some kind of connection to the fact that we have introduced, when it comes to health, like vaccines and stuff that we don't know a lot about, that we don't know the effects that it has on us in terms of like, the genetic repercussions, or just what it does to our DNA, because I feel like Pluto definitely deals with things at like a genetic level or on a cellular level, because it's also known for mutations and cancer or any of those things. So I'm a little iffy off the bat. Actually, I talked to you about this a little bit before we started, but when Pluto first enters into Aquarius, it's going to be on March 23rd, 2023. And the day that it enters, the moon enters into Taurus, and it's going to conjunct the North Node. So it's like Pluto doesn't just quietly enter into Aquarius, he like kicks the door in, right? Because it's the square to the moon, a square to the transiting nodes. And within about 48 hours of that day, the moon will conjunct Uranus, which is the traditional ruler of Aquarius. So between the conjunctions and all of the fixed squares that are happening, and the fact that the nodes are really actually going to square for several weeks is kind of spooky. Now on June 11th, let me go back here, that's when we have Pluto will retrograde back into Capricorn. So it's a very short period of time between March and June, just about 3 months, a little less than 3 months of Pluto and Aquarius. What's your take on that? Like watching something go from 20 degrees of a cardinal sign to 0 degrees of a fixed sign.
Yeah.
That screams all of 2020, by the way. Do you remember when Saturn was going in and out of Aquarius, and then finally at the end of 2020, Jupiter and Saturn moved together and they formed the conjunction at 0 degrees?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal. I mean, I don't think we can take much more of it. Like, thank God it's only 3. It's an introduction. No, it's like, okay, here it is. Just like anything. I think people forget that astrology is so supportive and part of the universe in that way. It introduces something kind of like a time lapse. It's like, here's an introduction, start getting used to it. And then you have time to digest it and see what happens until the planets go direct again. And the second ingress happens, right? Which is in January 21st, 2024.
Yeah. Yep. I just keep thinking about 2020. And even though, 2020 was intense for other reasons, we had the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn. Every single time, Saturn hit 29 degrees, we saw this buildup of restriction and limitation.
Yeah.
And it was like, at the time I was living in LA, and I mean, I knew what the chart said, that there was going to be some like crazy military stuff going on and things, being strong armed and locked down. And I remember at one point when it was at 28, 29 degrees for the first time, I walked into my neighborhood 2 blocks away just to go grab a coffee. And at the time they had in Echo Park a bunch of tanks and like military people that were like placed there. And I was like, this is not a joke. In the midst of 2020 also, it was, well, do we shut things down? Do we open things up? And it was the back and forth. And we saw that back and forth happening in terms of social isolation and distancing, and also just a real breakdown, I think, at least economically from what I could see. I know it ended up being globally, but in the United States, and a breakdown of business, right? And just a lot of control.
Yeah. And I think, just to make clear for everyone listening to or watching, that Saturn, that I think that's the after effect of Saturn having moved into Aquarius, right? Is the social isolation. But then Pluto's been in Capricorn since 2008. And when it joined Saturn and Jupiter, before Jupiter entered Aquarius, it was like that's when businesses kind of started to break down, because Pluto and Capricorn is synonymous with that. Yeah. So I really think it is in layers. Yeah. And we see,
I think in a way, preparing us, because I think when Pluto really does fully go into, I mean, not fully, it'll fully go in obviously in March of 2023, but it's probably going to be a bit of a shock and an introduction that this is the new normal. There are some things in terms of technology, there are some things in terms of money, wealth, resources that there ain't no going back from. And also in 2023, we see Saturn going into Pisces. Yeah. So 2024 is going to be a very interesting year when Pluto fully goes into Aquarius and it stays, and Saturn comes into conjunction with Neptune, and we actually realize that we are in for a period of having to learn, I think, to be more self-reliant and learning to almost be okay spending more time by ourselves, and what we do with that. Do we opt to become obsessive and fixated on technology to the point where we fuse it with
that social interaction so much? Yeah. That we may forget. I mean, that's a reality that I think Saturn coming into a conjunction with Neptune is going to show us. Like, no, you guys have kind of agreed to this. And that's something I think to point out, is that as these transits are happening, right, they don't happen overnight. I keep going back to last year and the North and South nodes too, and how prevalent that was, and the different kind of mouthpieces that we had for that eclipse cycle.
Yeah.
And now that the nodes have moved recently, right? North node into Taurus and South node into Scorpio. Now we're seeing, oh shit, the effects from last year's eclipses too. So there are so many different layers to this.
Yeah.
But last year, I just keep going back to that. Like, can people, every day my mind is kind of blown, which is hard as an Aquarius rising, about what people are believing and what people are, in terms of just confidence, like what they're kind of claiming, and how everyone is kind of a guru now too. It's just mind-blowing, the different facets at which this is manifesting. Not to go on a tangent, but I'm also thinking about that, how last year has also played a part, and each year is just kind of this layer upon layer of.
I think that it's just, there's so much reinforcement going on. Like my head spins, like especially looking at even in April, May, June of 2023, when Pluto does enter into Aquarius and it's starting to retrograde. Jupiter is also there as well. So not only do we have Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, square the nodes, which anybody who's got Pluto square the nodes will tell you that is, at least from an evolutionary standpoint, like that skip step of in a natal chart. It's like, oh, so you're a reluctant soul, huh? Like you've been a little unwilling to do that work. So it's really telling everybody, no, there's no real going back. We really need to do this. We need to reinforce this on top of Jupiter square Pluto, on top of Jupiter conjunct Uranus. I mean, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction only happens every, 12, 13-ish years? Yeah. I mean, come on. people have been talking about the astrology of 2020 and 2021, and I'm like, what about 2023 to 2026?
Yeah.
You guys see what's happening? Yeah, technologically, I think we're going to see insane shifts, especially when you talk about wealth, right? Pluto being wealth, but Taurus represents that physical money in hand, right? Check in hand, money in the bank, something that's valuable. You have to have it. And then Scorpio goes, okay, well, now we're going to either save it or invest it or we're going to spend it. Let's talk about the transition that's going to happen. I think there's going to be huge shifts in regards to wealth distribution and who has wealth and what wealth may be. I have said for some time that in the future with Pluto and Aquarius, I think truth is going to be, or information or education, facts, knowledge can be a very dangerous thing because it's going to be, I think, harder to come by. So I think we're going to find that we're not going to have as much free information and resources out there because those who are informed and know are going to be, in a way, more capable of being able to make decisions, especially with their finances, especially with their energy. But the Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus makes me feel like that can be huge for people who have been investing in innovations in money and resources or agriculture, land. What may be considered valuable or wealthy in the next 20 years is probably going to be either knowledge or the capability of being able to grow food or maybe even owning crypto.
Yeah. Yep. Bang on. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus? Where is it happening for you?
It's going to happen in my third, in Placidus, and whole sign of fourth.
So you're going to live on a commune with a bunch of people and grow your own vegetables?
On my own land in Cantabria in northern Spain. Yeah, absolutely. You're invited. Come. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited about that transit. I think that we're doing the work now to get to that point. And if you are awake and if you're really paying attention to where things are leading, you're going to be well prepared. Anybody is. But if you are ignoring and not planning for the future in that way, I think a lot of people are going to have a hard time. But I'm really excited for that transit. I think it's going to be good for us. Not to sum everything up as good or bad, but
some weird things that have just been coming up for me. Like I got a book on like homesteading and looking at buying like large seed packs. I mean, like I'm looking at like tens of thousands of like heirloom seeds and like all kinds of stuff just because I'm like, okay, like I know in the future you're going to have to grow your own stuff, have your own stuff. And like now when I start thinking about like living, the oppositions that I'm experiencing from my 8th house to my 2nd is like wanting less, giving things away, wanting people to have things and wanting to release. And I don't know if that's making it easier to detach and pick up and go somewhere else, or if it's because I think I was so freaked out with transit Uranus in opposition to my sun Pluto that I was like, I'm going to lose everything. And then I realized like, actually, you know,
self-initiated.
It's not that bad, you know, or maybe if it's not losing everything, it's consciously giving away things. And I realized it's been my information, things that I have not wanted to talk about or haven't wanted to share, or book recommendations, or just other things that I've been learning because I have a tendency. You saw my old apartment in LA, but I mean, 90% of my office is books. So I think it's been more me sharing some of that information with people. And I think that kind of leads into the Pluto and Aquarius, where information is going to come at a price. And it's going to be not just about a financial exchange, but an energetic exchange. And I think we're going to learn more about death and sex and energy revolving around both of those topics. Like I'm hoping we develop some kind of something. I mean, whether it's like a new fancy ghost box or like an app or something. Like, can you imagine, like, what if Pluto and Aquarius brings us the ability to be able to talk to those on the other side, right?
Wow.
Like, literally, or start learning more, I think, interdimensionally. I think we're going to learn a lot more about that, and that where maybe the traditional Pluto in, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, even Scorpio has been like, oh, ghost stories, but we actually find out that ghosts in the paranormal field, it's a lot more than what we're aware of, that perhaps maybe it's not necessarily just ghosts, but interdimensional beings, and that there's so many different dimensions, and whether it's, interdimensional beings from other planets, like aliens and other beings and portals. I'm really curious about all that stuff because I think we're going to learn more about it.
Do you think we'll discover what dark matter is? This is what I'm hoping.
I really do think so. Yeah, I do think so. And I do, sorry, the back. I do think so. And I do hope so. And I think we're going to learn more about black holes.
Yeah.
Right. And the universe in general, because Aquarius can have more to do with, that exploration. But I don't know. I'm really curious more than anything. And I know this sounds silly. What is Pluto and Aquarius going to do for astrology?
It might make it scientifically factual. I don't know. Let's see.
I hope so.
I think it's possible. I really do. I think what I hope is that maybe there's some regulations around astrology too. But that's another topic. But yeah, I think it's going to become factual maybe, or there will be ways of proving it or seeing that it's real.
Do you have concerns? Because I have these concerns and I'm trying not to be paranoid about it, but I have this feeling that before it does get to that point, that it is hopefully backed by science and proven, and that we see that there are correlations and connections that, you a good astrologer can look at transits and look at a chart and talk to you about what's coming down the line. Likely, obviously, astrology is not, I think, something that's guaranteed. It's just talking about what energies are going to kind of build up and what is likely to happen. In the end, we have free will. And I always try to remind my clients of that. But I have this feeling that before we have that breakthrough where it becomes regulated, or we do find that there is going to be facts and science that are going to really publicly start backing us, like that astrology could be outlawed in some capacity, or divining in general, looking into the future, in some way, almost like some Minority Report type situation where it's like looking into the future is something that certain powers might actually have issues with or fear, because astrology in general is meant to be like a unifying subject, right? It's meant to help us learn how to relate to other people, and that hopefully
in our universe.
Right. And realize that there's something bigger at hand that's playing a role, actually, whether that's cycles or transits or whatever. I have some concerns that possibly it might be something that is outlawed, or is a period of time where astrology is going to have to possibly go more in person again. I spoke about this in my most recent video. I went on a rant about all the stuff going on with censorship and stuff. But that's my other concern, especially looking at, 2023 with the squares, the Jupiter Uranus. Obviously, there's going to be money to make, in astrology. I think there's going to be a lot of new apps. I think a lot of people are going to realize that it makes sense from an investment standpoint, or it makes sense from a business standpoint. I think we're going to see a lot of people who might be put on payroll and might be working with people regularly, because anybody who seriously starts using astrology or applying astrology in their life, they see the power of it, and that it has the ability to really help you know when to take certain steps and certain actions, and whether that's launching a book, getting married, buying a house, opening a business, whatever, that there are certain time periods that it's going to work, and certain time periods that the energies are just not going to be there. So I'm hopeful that the community can expand. I'm also really hopeful that it becomes a thing where we're starting to actually weed out, possibly through astrology not being as popular, or maybe possibly through censorship or stuff that starts being limited in terms of what you can see on the internet. Pluto and Aquarius, we touched on it a little bit, and just in regards to privacy, that concerns me. If we're moving into a world where a mass majority of our resources may actually start coming from digital currency, and we're moving away from decentralized banking, we're not putting our money in a bank, we're not using a debit card or anything like that, then what happens if we do have, hackers in another country hack into a database where they have access to, you know, people's digital wallets. And like throughout time, you know, people who are criminals have had to evolve and had to learn to break into things. You know, back in the day, it might have been knocking over one of Wells Fargo's stagecoaches and stealing gold or money, or holding up banks, right? But what is it going to look like in the future? Is it going to be literally stealing people's digital wallets or identity?
Right. And that's already starting so much.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of money in security, you know, because Pluto, especially in Scorpio, I have Pluto in Scorpio, can, I think, deal with like privacy and wanting a lot of privacy when it comes to resources.
Yes.
And are we going to be finding out that we're losing our privacy, or that our privacy is being sold?
And some kind of exposure, right? It's always,
Do you think that we're going to jeopardize in any capacity?
I do. I think with those squares, absolutely. It's going to be putting us in a situation that we have to reevaluate. What is the right balance? What is empowerment? And to get there, we have to experience a disempowerment. So yeah, 100%. I think that's in the cards. And I think it's already starting so much.
What do you think Pluto in Aquarius is going to do for politics?
Ooh. Wow. Hopefully make them more humanitarian, more conscious. But what do I think about politics with Pluto moving into Aquarius? I don't know. Maybe the governments will be decentralized too, more, right? And
They're not going to go down without a fight, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's on its way. I always had this fantasy that, Anonymous, the group, would kind of take over and rule the world from some anonymous place. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, to say the least.
I don't know. I mean, I associate like governments and stuff like that with the 10th house or generals or bosses or whatever. But then I think of just politics in general, being very much connected to Aquarius. And I feel like hopefully, especially with the squares in 2023, corruption is really exposed, specifically corruption involving anything connected to like lobbying, and where, you know, certain individuals have clearly been paid off in order to kind of follow the status quo and be involved in, you know, legislation or anything that's actually corrupt, that's lining their pockets rather than other people. You can't really talk about Pluto without money or wealth. And you certainly can't not look at the squares going on between Jupiter and Uranus. I mean, I think that what we may find part of the corruption is that, I'm assuming, this is just based off of my interpretation of the astrology, not my political views, that they already know the system's broken. You know, some banks may already be underwater. They may already know that the whole thing's about to blow.
And a long time, no? Wouldn't you say, since like 2008?
Hundreds of years with the system and the way that it's worked, and centralized banking and that being kind of controlled and manipulated. Yeah. But the square to Jupiter Uranus is, it makes me wonder if part of the scandal that comes out in 2023 is that they were in on it, and it was like that was their bailout, making this move to digital currency and rolling that out, that probably this year and into early next year, they're already starting to move their investments. So they're already starting to convert some of their money, knowing that this is going to happen, so that way they can kind of carry their wealth over. And then I think in summer of 2023, when we see Pluto retrograde and then it squares with Jupiter Uranus, I think it's going to start to come out, quite frankly. And I think until we see Saturn and Neptune fully ingress into Aries and really start working on sextiling with Pluto and maybe some North Node Aries stuff, that's when I think it's going to actually really benefit individuals. So let's look at
What do you think about the dignity of Pluto being in fall in Aquarius? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, we also have Uranus in Taurus, so
right.
Similar energy. I mean, whenever you're dealing with a planet in fall, obviously it's going to bring out some of the darker sides, I think, of that particular sign. I have concerns for it, obviously, but I think that, to be honest with you, my hope is that it's actually paving the way, and it's going to make it a whole lot easier once Uranus ingresses into Gemini, and it will help us make those changes, especially, technologically. I think in the future, I think we are going to have energy efficient vehicles. I think Pluto and Aquarius is going to kill gas vehicles. I think they're going to run with this and say they're doing it for environmental reasons, when in reality, right now, we're seeing the North Node and Uranus moving into a conjunction later this year. I'm already saying it, the rising energy, rates. They're charging insane amounts of money for energy. And I think they're already preparing for it. So I think the Pluto and Aquarius is everybody jumping on the energy train saying like, oh, this is going to be best for the environment. When in reality, there's a lot of wealth that's being made through the concept of Pluto and Aquarius, humanitarianism, and saving the environment. But we may actually find out that that either results in technology that, quite frankly, is probably not the most high vibrational. That's what I'll say. Or maybe isn't really helping the environment, or maybe it's a lie. Maybe this is all, I think the next year we're going to see a lot of stuff come out about environmental taxes and meat taxes and carbon taxes. And they're going to start saying it's because they want to save the environment, when in reality, it's just the next scam to get everybody to buy into. So that way we're moving into this world where we're on a grid. I mean, I have real general concerns. What happens when all of our cars are on grids and the government can just say you've driven enough, we're going to lock you down, or you can't go to some places, or now everything is going to be intertwined. And it's like between your personal banking information, your health information, your travel information, it's all going to be intertwined.
Yeah.
And they're going to use
the database.
Exactly. You're going to lose privacy unless you're willing to go more in the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction direction, which is living off the grid, focusing on getting back down to basics, learning how to connect with the vibrations of the earth. Maybe I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I feel like.
No, I think it's really valid, and I think it's important. I do think with Pluto and Aquarius too, we are going to see that this is in relation to what you were saying earlier, but I do think we're going to revisit a lot of medicine too. A lot of either crystal healing, light therapy is going to be a huge thing. We're already seeing it. Different kinds of healing modalities too are going to be pretty prevalent with Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah, especially like genetic stuff, a lot of genetic stuff, information about that, genetic testing. I think innovations in medicine, especially on a cellular level. I'm hoping that this is going to materialize as abolishing, some health crises like AIDS, HIV, all different kinds of like blood disorders in general.
Yeah. What'd you say?
I'm excited for the healing stuff because I do feel like that is coming. I see that also, I think because Saturn is going to come into conjunction with Neptune and Pisces.
Yeah.
And perhaps maybe that is going to bring us a much more awareness when it comes to kind of cleaning up the mess after several years of people being in their home. Mental, emotional health is a real thing. We don't have people just dying from COVID. We have people dying from overdoses and drugs laced with fentanyl and alcohol and depression. And I think that perhaps maybe that's part of what's happening even this year, watching Jupiter and Neptune trine the South Node, is that people are waking up and realizing that they have a lot of trauma in the body. So I'm hoping that, especially Saturn and Neptune being second to Pluto, that it will show us that our wealth is really in our health, and that we have to focus more on our health, and not just physical health, but preventative health, mental, emotional, psychological health, spiritual health, right?
Yep.
Yeah. When Pluto re-enters Aquarius on January 21st, 2024, it'll be the Sun-Pluto conjunction. And now the nodes are in Aries and Libra. Curious about Chiron coming into conjunction with the North Node. I actually feel like, like I said, I probably sound like it's conspiracy theorist, but healing crisis. I have some real concerns about the VAXs and the aftermath of what may be coming, and that this could possibly be some kind of like global cleanup in general, possibly. Just looking at the 2-3 years down the road, just looking at the Pluto aspects, the North Node, Chiron conjunction, Saturn coming in conjunction with Neptune, global healing. And at this point, we are still seeing Jupiter square the sun Pluto. So even in the beginning of 2024, it's like still kind of beating that drum in regards to changes in resources and also food and what we're eating. Something else we didn't really talk about a little bit, but
you mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah, the Uranus stuff in Taurus. I mean, Uranus in Taurus right now, but we're going to see it with the North Node. Genetically modified food, possibly lab-grown meats, all kinds of things. What's in it? And is it healthy?
Right. And again, pitched around the concept of saving the environment, or veganism being a big thing. What do you think? This is something I've been thinking about a lot, or just Pluto in terms of the generations. Because I've been dealing with the Pluto square since 2008 with that stellium in Libra, right? It's been nonstop in Sun and Cancer. And I'm looking at the Pluto in Sag generation and how Pluto's going to sextile.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about Pluto and Scorpio, right? You have, which is going to get all those squares. So what do you think about the generations with Pluto? Who do you think, what do you think the overall consensus is going to be for the generations? Because I'm even thinking Pluto in Virgo has been getting that trine.
Right. Thank God for the Pluto and Virgo people. They've been so helpful and so instrumental for people my age. It's been really, really helpful. Some of them have really been struggling, especially, I can't remember the year, but the ones that have Pluto Uranus conjunct, Pluto Uranus. I mean, I think is there Jupiter transit in there? Maybe, but they've been experiencing oppositions to Neptune. So some of them have already been going through kind of spiritual awakening and upgrades. But if I were to go in order, I mean, I think that it's pretty safe to say 2020 to 2020, even in 2023, the Pluto in Leo generation are getting their butts kicked because of the Saturn opposed Pluto, because of the nodes squaring, because of the Uranus square. I have a lot of concerns for these people on an emotional, spiritual level because of some really rough ego things maybe that they're going through, which are manifesting as healing crises or issues relating to heart or cardiovascular issues, and for me, it all boils down to what they've been holding on to in their heart, possibly even issues with pride, or not dealing with inner child issues, or not really working with their creative, authentic self, and how that's been materializing as heart problems. For the Virgo generation, that's interesting because, for them, that's kind of really setting up in their sixth house from their sun. So, or their Pluto when you think about it. So, that obviously is going to be a profound shift, I think, in the workforce. And I think that's primarily going to be because of so much upgrades. I think of Pluto and Aquarius is if you're not constantly training and learning new techniques and keeping up with the times, Pluto and Virgo may have a really difficult time adapting in the workspace and being able to feel like they are as productive, primarily because technology is you can't keep up with it, so it may really kind of wipe some of their potential jobs, unfortunately. They may also have a real issue with technology coming in and taking care of business, like cleaning, or managing their health. And they may have routines for how they like to do it. Maybe they don't want a robot to deliver their vitamins or clean their house, or, maybe they want a real server when they go in and they dine and have a meal. So I think of them not adapting well to some of that stuff.
Wow. Right.
Them wanting to pick their own produce. That's something I've heard a lot from Pluto in Virgo is I hate these Amazon people. They don't pick good potatoes, or, my melons come damaged. Very, very, very Pluto and Aquarius. But health issues for them as well. And maybe change and transformation to health. I feel like Pluto in Virgo, because, they were born on the heels of when we were starting to see vegetarianism, veganism. They're more prone to digestional issues and disorders and imbalances that they, on the flip side, can basically be like, hey guys, I've already been eating like this most of my life. So we might see a real rise in cooks and chefs and restaurants, and them adapting and kind of overriding the challenging aspects and coming into a period where they may lead and be the front runners for what's going to be new, clean eating, healthier lifestyles. So that in some cases can be very positive for them. I think they're going through having to learn a lot of that right now, to be honest with you. They're looking for healthier options, which may push them to want to do more. I wonder if we're going to have robot dogs. I wonder if it's going to be like the 90s all over again. We had those like Chia pets or Giga pets and like all those like little robot dogs. But I really wonder if we're going to have digital versions of animals for some of those people, or if that might materialize for them, or maybe they
It already hasn't it?
Yeah, kind of.
And, yeah, digital fashion, digital real estate. I mean, it's all there.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's very much the Jupiter Uranus stuff. I think we're going to find that Pluto and Aquarius is actually going to show us that like the internet 2.0 or 3.0, whatever, is literally going to be this new metaverse, and you can be very wealthy owning land there in the not so distant future. Obviously Pluto in Libra, I think, is going to love it. I mean, I think you'll finally be really stoked when you start seeing all these trines to your 8th house, obviously. But Pluto in Libra generation, and I have thought about this. I didn't say this, but because Pluto is sexuality, and it's very much connected to not necessarily sexual preference, but more just how we actually
wealth, right? It's reproduction, wealth. That's how you use your sexual energy.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to see a lot more polyamorous relationships.
Totally.
I think we're going to see a lot more open relationships or communal type of relationships from this. And the Pluto and Libra generation might finally come into a time in society where, if that is something that they have struggled with, especially I think of like the Saturn-Pluto conjunctions in Libra, or the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in Libra, especially the tail end of Libra, so the later degrees. I have found that those who have later degrees, 28, 29 of Libra, seem to have really karmic issues in relationships and lots of breakups and makeups and staying with people for the wrong reasons because they want partnership. That we're going to learn that love and energetic exchange doesn't just have to be sexual or romantic. It can be platonic, and that it's really important for us to really focus on friendship. And I think Pluto and Libra people are really going to see that you might have just as a passionate relationship with a friend and commitment to a friend and partnerships as you do as romantic partners. Or that if you are somebody who has struggled with commitment or indecisiveness in relationships, or maybe you have kind of really decided that commitment is not for you and you want to do it different, we might see a period of time where it's like, people are maybe having marriage licenses that expire after 5 years or 10 years, and you choose if you want to do it, versus feeling locked into a relationship forever, right? Yeah. So some Pluto and Libras would be like, never. I would never do that, which I totally get, but I'm Venus, Uranus, so I feel like kind of what you're coming out of, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more in the future, but when I think of the Pluto and Scorpio generation, I mean, that generation has seen some shit. We have, many of us have had, Pluto touch a lot of personal planets, because especially the kind of late 80s, early 90s had conjunctions in Sagittarius, and then also conjunctions in Capricorn. So it's like our lives have been one Pluto transit after another. I've had Pluto touch all of my personal planets, literally, except for my moon. It's conjuncted all of my personal planets, but my moon and my Jupiter. So I kind of look at this and go, there's not much that I haven't already been through, but I don't want to challenge the universe episode any of that. But Pluto in Scorpio is super powerful. And when you're dealing with the fixed Pluto placements, kind of like Pluto in Leo, a little reluctant to change is an understatement. I think the fear to change is also an understatement. And if there's one thing I know, it's that because Pluto is now 4 houses away from our natal Pluto, it's more going to be about our home, our families changing, our nuclear families. You know, many of us are choosing not to get married or not to reproduce and have children. We're seeing low birth rates, low marriage rates. Part of that is just because, you know, financially and economically we can't afford it. But also a lot of us have a lot of trauma from our upbringing. A lot of the Pluto and Scorpio have experienced a lot of death and destruction and abuse and toxicity in our early childhood environments. And we're consciously choosing not to carry that over. So many of us might be deciding to do families differently, where it might be that we don't get married and we have, you know, pets. It might be that we are in long-term relationships, but we don't feel like we need to identify as being, you know, with the oppositions and the squares that we're going to be seeing also from Uranus and Jupiter. This is a large group of people who are getting involved in the crypto stuff because they're kind of going, okay, you know, I was a kid when the internet came out. That was huge. We saw how it changed the world. And many of us are investing our time and our energy into NFTs, digital art, cryptocurrency, learning about agriculture, learning about cannabis, learning about food and food preservation. And I think for a lot of us, it's also going to be issues revolving around fertility and fertility issues and reproductive issues.
And mental health, don't you think? I feel like your generation is the pioneer of mental, psychological, sexual health.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, we have Pluto and Scorpio for a reason, you know, bragging rights.
Seriously, but also comfort with death, don't you think? I feel like you're a death midwife in addition to being an astrologer, and I feel like we've gotten so far away from death, and we prioritize birth so much. There's such pressure and emphasis on conceiving, right?
Yeah.
And birth, and we are so afraid of death, and I think that's going to be something that your generation is going to popularize and make more explicit. Like, this needs to be also accepted, and it's a process, and death is a very, don't you think?
Well, we have doulas, you know, not a lot of people know that we have death midwives. I mean, that's something that I trained in for a while, and I did that because it was, I don't know, for me, it's like, I feel like if I'm not, like, I do continuing education every 2 years. I do a program every 2 years of something that interests me. It doesn't always have to be astrology. And I feel like it's so important because life and death, or birth and death, are the same energies. You go through the same, almost like contractions in the process, and, you know, souls leaving versus souls coming in. It's so important, obviously, to usher souls in and nurture and take care of babies and create that environment. But what about people who are going out? And what about the way that they're going out? And what about the regrets and the grief and the pain that they're going out with? And I think a lot about the karma that we create in life and how we carry that over, and just the amount of people who I've spoken to in the process of working with that stuff who are terminally ill or dying, and a lot of regrets and stuff that people have on their deathbed. And I don't think people really talk a lot about that. And that we look at funerals as this thing that's this, like, probably $1 billion industry where we're so afraid of death, at least here in the Western world, that we want to pay people tens of thousands of dollars to take our loved ones, prepare them, preserve them, put them in a box. And then, I mean, it's just we're so removed from that. And I'm so in love and obsessed with cultures around the world and how they treat death and the rituals and the routines revolving around that, whether that's, you know, having a home, you know, like in some parts of the world, they'll have the body in the house for several days, and they'll preserve the body and cover it in flowers and close down the energy points and focus on really helping the soul leave the body and go through the bardo and do it, and being aware of the auric body and that it's very sensitive. Yeah. So I think that our generation can basically be like, look, death is also equally as important as life, and that we need to be more consciously playing a role in it. Therein lies the possibility also for wealth. I think about Uranus ruling Aquarius, and that the way that we're going to look at assisted suicide is going to be very different.
My mind was going,
yeah. And how we look at suicide from a spiritual and a psychological perspective, And who are we to say that souls have to stay and endure things? And that is to each their own in their lesson and their path. And I think of like people who are in Europe, like that suicide pod that's had a lot of controversy. And it's supposed to be like this little pod you get in, and it's peaceful and it's got sounds, and there's like, you know, probably even a screen or something in there. So you're just really peaceful, and then it just sucks all of the air out of the chamber. So I think we're going to learn a lot more about that. I think we're going to learn a lot more about psychological health, and also hopefully learning more and introducing more studies, and started bringing that more so into the Western world, looking at psychedelics and how it can help us on a psychological level, especially when it comes to trauma. And, you know, that's why I was so obsessed with, you have to watch the first episode of Changing of the Gods, because it talks a lot about Richard Tarnas and his involvement in learning that certain studies prove, they found like correlating timelines where people were more responsive to some of the medicines that they were using during certain planetary transits, because they were ready for it. They were open to it. And there's no coincidence that it had to do with like Pluto and Uranus transits, right? So
not Neptune, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Me too, but
yeah. I also just have this feeling that, you know, Pluto in Aquarius is going to materialize as us also moving into a future where I think we're going to learn a lot more about the spirit world. I think we're going to learn a lot more about, you know, clairvoyance, clairsentience, you know, telepathic communication. You know, I think of like how it could go down the path of Neuralink, where, you know, you think something and then it shows up. Or can it go further down the path of us kind of realizing that we all have these abilities? It's just a matter of learning to flex it. And yeah, that I'm excited for. I think that's going to be something that's pretty positive that's going to come from this. But also trash. That's one other thing that I kept thinking about is trash. Because if anybody knows any really significant Scorpio or 8th house placements or Pluto and Scorpio, it's like one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? And maybe through all these like really difficult situations, it's materialized as us learning survival methods. We've got a ton of trash on this planet. We are a part of the generation that was not really recycling yet when we were kids. So that was a new concept for us as we got older, and the idea of sorting that out. But I think the Pluto in Scorpio generation may be responsible for finding new ways to handle trash, and whether that's things like enzymes and stuff that can eat plastic that we're going to start putting in landfills, or I have a feeling people are going to play around with the idea of like shooting trash into like asteroids and putting it out into space and getting it off the planet. So I think that's going to be something else. And they may be the leaders in also, I think, saving, securing, and preserving old technology. Because once we're on the grid, and once you're connected through a 5G tower and a cell phone and your laptop and your computer and all this stuff, you can be tracked. But the Pluto and Scorpio generation will be the ones who will fix the cars, save the old Game Boys, have us playing, you know, video game consoles that aren't connected to the internet. They're going to be able to fix computers, and they may be the ones that go rogue. So that excites me a little bit. And then I guess Pluto and Sag, I mean, they're fearless, man.
Wow. Sometimes I think about it. I'm like, okay, if I could pick a Pluto, I think I would pick a Pluto and Sag. They are so fearless, so outspoken. Yeah.
God bless them. They're the ones who brought memes as well. I feel like they're the ones responsible for memes and relating through dark comedy and humor, right? Yeah. But I'm excited for them because I just know what, you know, Pluto and Capricorn has done for all the sextiles to my planets. And it's been incredibly helpful, and it's been really empowering. Remember, kiddos, that you have to use the sextile. So you have to actively be working with both your natal placements in Sag and your natal Pluto in order to activate everything in Aquarius. For them, obviously, it's going to be, you know, 2 signs away. So that is going to be like behind their Pluto. So, excuse me, not behind their Pluto. It's going to be after their Pluto. So to me, that's more like communication, cars, apps, you know, the internet, websites, mail. I think that they're going to be responsible for, I think, especially when Uranus goes into Gemini, I think we're going to nix I think we're going to get rid of the post office.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see the rise of email again. I think we're going to see the rise of all kinds of new forms of receiving messages and things like that. So they may play a role in new messaging systems. Like the 90s, it was AIM. I wonder what's going to be next. That's going to be maybe more private and not something that can be encrypted.
Right. And think about this whole like self-help generation though, in terms of, I mean, they're seekers. They always know what's right. Who's the authority? That's what I'm wondering. They're the authority, but how?
Yeah. I like the way that they've really been very involved and very adamant, revolving around breaking down anything that is about, there not being enough diversity, right? So that, Sag is not going to see gender, it's not going to see ethnicity, it's not going to judge you based off of those things, nor your education and things like that. So it's been interesting to see some of these Pluto and Sag people who are really upending the concept and the idea of selling your soul to go to college. They're very much about self-education and culture and travel. And so I think that that's really exciting when it starts making aspects to Pluto, because they may be the ones responsible for setting up and organizing what's going to be new educational centers and institutions, and ones that may be self-guided or ones that may be more diverse, and also playing a role in diversifying and helping us explore new languages and becoming, I think, better rounded when it comes to that stuff, or just applications of things that we can be learning that are going to be more life applicable. It's pretty safe to say those of us who have gone through college, I mean, unless you're going to school to be like a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer or a vet, a lot of the things that we're learning, we're not applying. And so I think the Pluto and Sag generation is going to go, what are you really fixated on learning about? What do you want to experience? What do you want to learn? Okay, so there's going to be more in-depth and different types of educational centers that are going to come from them, that are going to help us hopefully have tools for real life,
Right.
Yeah.
I can see that.
New groups and organizations, new social platforms, and religions. Yeah, but they're about truth.
Yeah.
So it's so funny, Trump just dropped his new platform. And I'm anticipating that there's going to be more decentralized platforms, websites, apps coming, because the Pluto and Sag generation do not want to be censored. They don't. Yeah. Just looking at the dates, one thing I did not bring up is that even though Pluto re-enters Aquarius on January 21st, 2024, actually, Pluto will retrograde and visit Capricorn again in September of 2024. So that's going to be the final visit. And it looks like it's going to stay there until about the 19th of November. Fascinating. That's not very long.
No.
So it'll only be there until the 19th of November. And then it's in Pluto to stay, in Aquarius to stay. And at that point, at least Pluto's sextiling the North Node. So it's almost like 2023 and all of 2024 is adapting kind of the shock of the square to the nodes and the planets in Taurus. But then it moves, of course, at the end of Scorpio season, it moves back into Aquarius to stay. And it's going to be there for a while. It's going to be there until about March of 2043. Briefly in 2043, it'll dip into, this will be March 9th. It's going to dip into Pisces. So obviously we got some time here. But March of 2043, it's going to pop into Pisces briefly. And obviously that'll be a video that I do at some point. At some point in 18 years.
Do it, the nodal return. Yeah, in 18 years.
Yeah, we'll do it then. And interesting, then we have the North Node in Aries again in the South Node in Libra again. So it's still about the self, focusing on the self, independence, and then, you know, how we relate. It'll dip there briefly, and then it looks like the final visit to Aquarius will be between August 31st, 2043, through January 19th, 2044. So this is way down the road, but a lot's going to happen. And I'm actually most curious because it looks like, January of 2044, Pluto's going to go fully into Pisces. But I guess food for thought is that before that happens at the beginning of 2045, oh no, I guess that's at the end. Never mind. There's going to be a Pluto North Node conjunction. So so actually we're not going to get it. So it's going to be the North Node at 29 Pisces in 2043. And then finally, the next chapter will be that North Node Pluto conjunction in Pisces. And that'll be in 2045. But obviously that's a long ways away from now, so we don't need to get into that. But 20-ish years is a Pluto transit. It's going to be a long time. I guess, any parting words on any of this?
Not much to say. I don't know. Just, I'm really excited. I'm also hopeful that people will really stay ethical. That's my major concern.
Hopeful that people wake up.
I hope people wake the fuck up. I am excited for all of the change, though. I think we really need it. I think especially after Pluto being in Capricorn for so long, we've needed that deconstruction of government and of everything Pluto and Capricorn represents. I think it's been really necessary. And I'm seeing even in the tail end of Pluto and Capricorn, this kind of fight response, right? For power, for money, for control, for this traditional ways that are not sustainable. So it's interesting to see as Pluto moves through the tail end of Capricorn, how people are resisting that shift and that.
I keep calling it the death rattle.
It's exactly what it is.
Death rattle. That's what's happening right now. It's the death rattle. And it's going to get really tight and intense when we see stuff at 29 of Capricorn, especially right around the time this is coming out in early March, because we're going to see Mars, Venus, and Pluto conjunct. So the breakdown before the breakthrough, followed by then what's going to be several weeks of Mars, Venus, and Saturn and Aquarius all in Aquarius. So with those conjunctions, obviously it's not fun to have Venus trapped between Saturn and Mars, but it's going to be like a little slice, I think, of this is where we're going. So I think it's really important just to also note that March and really clear into about mid-April, as all of these planets conjunct Saturn and Aquarius and they square the nodes, it's really kind of showing everybody collectively, we have to really make this hard change. And the fixed signs obviously are going to probably go kicking and screaming. But that's a little preview of
and let's not forget, air is about a new way of thinking, a new mental state, a new consciousness too. So that's something very different that I hope people really understand. It's
abstract, and it requires, because it is not as easily seen, it requires a lot of communication, a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, a lot of sharing, and thinking outside of the box. And so, yes. Well, the only way through this period, the next 2 or 3 years, is going to be collectively working with other people, because other people need that. Aquarius is vibration. So it's about raising vibrations. There's a reason why people have not been able to come together. There's a reason why they don't want people protesting, because of our body's vibration, our consciousness. So actually coming together is going to be incredibly important. And I think that kind of the standoff that we're seeing between planets in Aquarius and planets in Taurus is, are we connected because we're connected through screens? right? Is that enough coming together through screens and FaceTiming? And does that give us what we need? And then, Uranus, I think in Taurus is the physical embodiment, the physical connection. So you're going to see lots of stuff revolving around now connecting your body to technology beyond just an Apple Watch. I'm talking like chips and implants and other things, and how we're upgrading the physical body. Or are you opting to focus more on reconnecting with people in person and doing more in person and more group one-on-one work? And it might be a little rogue and it might be a little out there. But I think over the next 2 years, we're going to see society split off into the two groups, the ones that want to go further into the Aquarian rabbit hole.
Which makes me think about something that, to go back to the beginning of our conversation, you said, Rose, what are you really into? More than anything, I'm really into embodiment. And that's what I've been teaching. I'm calling my course the Embodiment Series. I was teaching all last year, cosmic embodiment, just really, really sitting down and meditating and being mindful of the food you eat and how much time you spend on the computer or your phone. It's so essential right now.
Yeah.
That's what I've really learned, is having all that air too. It's like, when do you just shut it down? Aquarius being also co-ruled by Saturn, right? As its contemporary rulers, having the boundaries, mental boundaries, also having information boundaries. So I think that's really important to work with.
Hopefully people lean more on the Uranus, Jupiter, Taurus transits, the North Node Taurus, because just the energy that we get from the earth, from putting our feet in the grass, from doing yoga out in the sun, from gardening, from growing our own food, working with crystals, doing our face masks, whatever it is that you have to do, vibrationally connecting back to the earth is going to be so incredibly important. And for those of us who can't, there's going to be innovations. So things like grounding mats, or possibly like, things that vibrate that you can, keep on your body to kind of help reground you, what you're eating maybe, or just innovations in how we're growing food, especially for people who don't own land. I think we're going to see communal buying and purchasing of land, and also innovations in how people can grow food in urban environments. I think that's going to be really important. Community gardens, and more than just having like a little garden grow box. It's like knowing that you can actually grow your own food, and do it with some technological advancements like veggie towers and like all kinds of stuff. So I'm excited for that.
Me too.
I'm sure we'll be back. It would be great to, if you do want to come back, it'd be great to have you back and we can talk more about maybe like the Pluto ingress and how it's going to affect the signs. And we can talk about like the 12 rising signs.
I'd love to talk. I think today was, so important, all the things that you were talking about, just in terms of coloring the next, 20 years. But I am really interested in Pluto as an initiation too. What do you think? Like, do you think that when Pluto crosses the angles, which people will experience 1 to maybe 2 times in their lifetime, right?
Yeah, that's huge. You've had that. You had it on your midheaven.
I had it on my midheaven. And now my ascendant. But I've just been watching people, preparing for this transit. I've been watching all the Capricorn risings.
I've seen some amazing transitions for Cap risings. I've seen people lose like over 100 pounds and start weightlifting. I've seen people completely transform the structure where they've gone and done surgical procedures to have a more chiseled like face. Yeah. I've seen some really crazy things people have done to their skin, but I've also seen some complete transformations in regards to their identity and separating themselves from this idea that they are what they do for a living, which I think is so magical for Cap risings. I can only speak on my experience. I have Capricorn on my IC, and the year that Pluto crossed into my IC was into my 4th house was incredibly difficult. I'm a nighttime chart, so a lot of my stuff is super private, and it plays a huge role in like what I ultimately end up talking about and teaching. I try to focus more on like just being more introspective and giving people my emotional experiences because it can help. I'm a projector. That's what I do. But when Pluto crossed,
can join. You also have Cancer in your MC. I love that.
I'm mommy.
Yeah.
Most people see the cherub face and the boobs, but that's okay.
No, you're Libra rising.
When Pluto went into my 4th house, that was a really big change for me because it was when obviously it squares when you have an ingress onto an angle. it squares everything. So it doesn't just affect that house. It will, but you will see it change and kind of impact all of the angles in your chart. I moved from where I had lived for 14 years. I moved to another city, which was really a big shift for me. My family changed. You know, my parents had divorced for the second time to each other. And I moved in with my mother, who was a Capricorn, and was kind of just thrown into that situation. And, you know, Pluto in the fourth house in Capricorn, just a very intense experience with your living and restrictions and stuff in regards to one of my parents, which definitely materialized. My grandfather on my dad's side died. And what was really interesting about that was that's when I first started having really significant, profound psychic experiences. I had them when I was little. I used to see spirits and stuff when I was little. But when I was 14 and this happened, Pluto also became conjunct my natal Uranus and Venus, which is my chart ruler. So what materialized for me was like seeing spirits after they died. So like right after my grandfather died, he came and visited me about a week or two later on the couch. And it was like a full-blown apparition. I could see him. I could talk to him. We had a whole conversation. And then from then on, it became like this thing in my family that before somebody died, I would have a dream and I would know that they were going to pass. So now it's happened with about 4 or 5 different people in my family. So I always know, and then they come and visit me afterwards, which is really strange. Super magical, but kind of strange. My house was really haunted. The apartment that I moved into with my mom, it was really weird. We had dog toys, and we saw like dog toys like literally levitate and move, and stuff get thrown across the room, and lights would go on and off, and blinds would move, and you'd hear light switches. Come to find out, that apartment was haunted, that there was a little boy who lived there in the early 80s and fell off of a 3-story ledge into the center of the complex. And they had people cycling through there a lot that didn't stay in that apartment for some reason. And it was some dark Pluto stuff. Like the next door neighbor ended up unfortunately committing suicide, and we didn't know. We just heard a loud bang, and then they found the body like 2 days later because somebody went knocking on the door. And yeah, it was some really, I mean, I'm not saying this to scare people. It was Capricorn, so of course it's just some weird ancestral stuff. But yeah, that year or two with the first ingress was that was a lot for me. But it was also just this kind of like woke everything up. You know, the fourth house can be about just real intense psychic stuff, and I started learning a lot of stuff about my lineage and my family background. So yeah, it was colorful. But we should do that in the future. If you want to come back, we'll talk about it, especially as we get closer to these transits. If you want to do like a thing where we sit down and give insight maybe into the ingress and how it's going to affect the 12 rising signs, that could be really fun.
Yeah, let's do it. I was thinking when Pluto entered Sag, it conjoined Uranus and my MC. I was 13 years old. I don't know why I hadn't looked at that.
And you became obsessed with astrology?
Yeah, totally. And
the Pluto Uranus transit's an interesting one. That's definitely when my fixation with astrology and tarot and everything really started.
Yeah, that was the exact year. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, and on an angle. So, I mean, it conjuncted your chart ruler. So obviously whatever happened that year played a huge role ultimately in the future of what you ended up doing, how you identified out in the world, and ultimately becoming a teacher of astrology, right? And a world citizen.
So crazy. I remember, getting like activated in terms of Reiki in my hands. But anyway, that's a personal story I'll share with you later. But yeah, what a year. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess hopefully this inspires you guys to want to learn more about astrology. Hopefully this inspires you to want to start looking a little bit further into the future in your chart, because some of these transits are only just about a year away, even though they're not really going to start kicking until 2024. It doesn't hurt to look at it, be aware of it, prepare. You know, that's the whole purpose of astrology, is knowing what's coming. So that way you can thrive and connect deeply with yourself and others around you. Once again, if you guys liked this chat, please give us a thumbs up, leave us comments, let us know below. Where is Pluto transiting in Aquarius in your chart? Do you have any placements right around 28 degrees of Capricorn through 3 degrees of Aquarius? I'd love to hear how this is already manifesting for you. If you like these fireside chats, let me know. I'm creating a master list of people who I'm going to be kind of tapping on their shoulder and asking them if they want to come and join and chat more. Rose, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and nerding out with me about astrology and being somebody who is going to definitely be pretty big in the near future with that Pluto transit. So I look forward to seeing how that manifests for you and you coming into a period of just continued growth and success in your career and becoming even more of an amazing teacher.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. All right, guys, you take care. I will see all of you very soon. If you want to book a reading with me or if you're interested in following my social media, I'll also put Rose's links. Check out the links below. Otherwise, I will see all of you guys very soon. Take care.